All right, here we go. All right, so the biggest issue, the biggest problem I have seen so far in your guys' assignments is students misusing or not understanding everything you need if you use while true. If you use while true, one, you don't need another while loop in it. All right, you don't need while true. Let's do x is int input. While true if, and then I've had some people go while x is greater or less than or equal to 0, print congrats. Oh wait, no, if it's less than a 0, let's do this. Then we're gonna go. Please enter a positive number. I've had students that do this, and if you do this, your code never ends, right? And the student added this while true, and if you got rid of this while true, your code is 100% correct. So you don't need, in our current level, I will say you probably will never need a while loop inside of a while loop. You may need a for loop in a while loop or a while loop in a for loop, but you won't ever need a while loop in a while loop.
So if you do while true, you don't need another while in it?
Correct.
But what if you do like a while without a while true or while false?
Well, okay, so let me get to that. If you have a while true, this is another thing that you guys tend to be missing. If you have while true, your code, your loop will always run. The only way it will stop is if you have the word or the command break. If you do not have, if you have while true and you do not have break somewhere in that loop, you are wrong. You don't need continue. You need break. You can have continue, that's fine, but you don't need it. If you have while true, you have to have break. I'm going to say that like 4 times in a row so you guys understand. If you have while true, you need to have break. If you have while true, you need to have break. That's 2. If you have while true, you need to have break. 3. If you have while true, you need to have break. What do you need to have if you have while true, JD?
Continue.
Break. Matthew, what are you doing? You're confusing me up here. I'm like, wait, did I just... Never mind. So, if you have this while true, you have to have break. While true is I feel like some of you guys are using it as a crutch because you don't understand while loops and you're more familiar and comfortable with if statements. Some people are doing that, and if the code works, it works, right? That's kind of where we're at in our class. One thing I want to let you guys know that if you're familiar with if statements, while loops are if statements that don't stop checking. So an if statement checks what if this thing is greater than, less than, some relation to something else, right? If x is greater than 0, if x is equal to this, if y is less than a, or whatever, right? It's a comparison of 2 things. A while loop is that same comparison that doesn't stop checking to see until it's not true. So what you can do, what a lot of kids have been doing is they'll do this. If x is less than or equal to 0, if x is greater than 0, print good job, and then they do break, and they'll do continue here if x is less than. And it's like, does that work? Yeah. But what you can do is these do the same thing. At least I'm pretty sure. Let me run it just to make sure, because I know people on YouTube will be like, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He thinks those two things are the exact same. Because that's how people on YouTube sound. Hi. No, I don't want student folders. I want student resources. So this is Loop's review. All right, so this pops up. Please enter a number: -5, -5, -5, -5, -5, -5, -1. All right, good job. -5, -5, -5, -5, -1. So that, oh well, this doesn't say good job. So these two sections of code do the exact same thing, but this one is a lot simpler. There are times 100% you have to have while true. You want this line, you want this section of code to always happen, period. And then once you're in that loop, you jump out of it or not. This, we only want to ask for a positive number if they've typed in something that's a negative number. So this is just a simpler thing. However, if you're good with if statements, right, you guys can write it as an if statement, right? We're going to evaluate one time to see if what they type in is negative or positive. So we run this, enter a number, -5. Okay, well, that didn't repeat as often as I'd like, but it is doing exactly what I want. It is checking to see if a number is negative or positive. Once you have this and you're like, okay, I need it to now repeat, change to a while loop. An if statement, a while loop is an if statement that just repeats until that is true. Until that is false. My bad. Does that make sense? That's the biggest thing I'm seeing is you guys are, and I'm not, you guys are trying to do this and it's hurting you. Now I understand some of you guys are like, I totally get this. I love using while true and break. Awesome. Some people are like, you're trying something new and you're not, I'm not faulting you. I'm not saying you guys, can't believe you guys don't get this. Like, come on. I commend you for trying something you're not familiar with because that's how you get better. All right, how many chess games has a chess master lost?
A lot.
Nick, 0. He's that good. No.
Oh no, I'm just raising my hand so you can finish talking and then you can answer.
Yeah, I think I heard Libby go, what is he talking about? Did you say that? What I'm saying is that you only get better at something by failing, by being corrected. You only learn by two things, mistakes or mentors. So by coding, you're going to make mistakes, but I also feel like you're trying to do something that you're not 100% understanding, and I'm not faulting you for that. I'm just saying be careful, because by failing, you'll get better. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you guys have questions on while true or whatever? All right, Christine.
Not while true, because I never use that. But overall, so if you try to use a break or continue, but you're not using a while true, like what is it doing?
So what it's doing is continue, ignores the rest of the code, and starts the loop over.
Okay.
So let me I'm not actually going to draw. I'm just going to use my mouse. So once we get to this continue, it ignores all of this and comes back up here.
And then a break. So if like I had a break on that second, on that fourth line there.
This one?
Yeah, like what would that?
What it does is this ignores the rest of the code and jumps out. So right here, it doesn't really do anything. But if this were break,
Yeah.
it would ignore all of this and come to right here.
So would it print like the end result? Like,
Nope. It's once it hits break, it jumps out of the loop and then goes to the next thing that's not inside the loop.
Okay.
So break and continue, all they do is they ignore the rest of the loop. Wherever it is, the rest of the loop gets ignored. And it either starts the loop over again or it jumps out of the loop. Break jumps out of the, because you're breaking the loop, you're breaking the cycle, you're jumping out of it. Continuing is you're perpetuating, you're continuing the loop, you're going through it again and again and again.
So when you have continued, can you like program it to keep like using continue until they enter like the correct information, or it just
You don't really need to, right? You want to do, if it's a little loop like this, you probably don't need to. But depending on what you're coding, if you have a lot more complex, like, hey, I have 15 different things that I need to evaluate for, like if you just have a lot of if statements in a while loop, so they're typing something in and you're evaluating it and you have 15 different things and you only want one of them and you don't want it to evaluate everything, you can use continue to start the loop over or break to jump out of it. With this continue, so let's say this code doesn't exist, right? No, I want that continue to be seen. So this code doesn't exist, right? Do I need that continue? Or will it? Because what happens in a loop, once the loop gets to the end of the loop, it automatically starts over. So this continue here, if we ignore this code down here, is not needed. It's extra.
But if you put break after that, then it just stops.
If I put break instead of continue or after continue?
Instead of continue.
Instead of continue, it will jump out. It will stop.
Okay.
Which brings me to my next announcement, or my next thing I want to tell you guys. While actually, let's do this. This is another thing I saw in someone's assignment. Is that a loop anymore?
No.
No, it's not.
Well, technically, but it breaks.
Will it loop?
No.
How many times will that happen?
One.
So X needs to be positive, will only be printed one time. Right? Is that? It needs to be a negative number.
So,
Right? That's no longer a loop, that's just an if statement.
You see it. Correct. You need to put continue.
I don't need to do continue. Because with having this break, that you create this into a if statement. If you have break, essentially one indent in a while loop, it's only an if statement. Because as soon as it gets to that break point, it jumps out. And if you have, if x is equal to -5, print, good guess, or whatever. But, no. But I type in -5, x needs to be positive. my loop ends as soon as it hits this breakpoint. If this is if this is now indented inside of an if statement, nope. Well, now I have a never-ending
If it's
loop.
inside of an if statement, then it's gonna keep going. But if it's outside, then it's gonna just
Yeah.
stop. Okay. And then if it's a continue, what does it do?
The continue would just start the loop over.
Okay. No matter its position.
No matter where it is. It just, wherever it is in the loop, it starts it over. Break, wherever it is in the loop, exits.
Okay. Because I get an error a lot when I put continue.
If you have continue and it's not inside of a loop, it won't work. So I've also seen, I saw this. What's wrong with this?
It's not inside the while loop.
It's not inside the while loop, but this continue is inside of this else statement. This else statement needs to be even with this if statement. So this was just a little indentation error, and then it worked. But continue starts the loop over wherever it is. Break ends the loop wherever it is in the loop. It ignores the rest of it and ends. A continue ignores the rest of the loop, starts over. Make sense? Okay. If statement while break. Any questions? Okay, break time.